When ants enter your home, do you really believe it is random? Pause for a moment before you answer. You see them along the edge of the wall. A thin, disciplined line, silent, coordinated, purposeful. They move as if following instructions no one else can hear. Most people respond immediately. Spray, clean, remove, problem solved. But is it, or did something just happen that you interpreted too quickly? In a world trained to dismiss meaning, we have become uncomfortable with the possibility that existence might be speaking. Not in superstition, not in fantasy, but in subtlety. The 12th to 13th century Andalusian scholar Ibn Arabi once proposed a worldview that unsettles modern certainty. He argued that nothing in existence is meaningless. Not a falling leaf, not a passing thought, not an unexpected encounter, and perhaps not even ants crossing your kitchen floor. Now let's be clear. This is not about claiming that every insect is a coded message from heaven. That would be simplistic. Ibn Arabi was not naive, nor was he mystical in the exaggerated way modern pop spirituality tends to be. He was intellectually rigorous, metaphysical, grounded in Quranic cosmology. His central idea was this: existence is a language, and human beings are capable of reading it if they slow down. What if the question is not, why are there ants? But rather, why did I notice them now? Why this moment? Why this interruption? Why this irritation? The Qur'an repeatedly reminds the reader that signs, ayat, exist both in scripture and in the world itself. The same word used for verses is used for signs in nature. That is not accidental. It suggests correspondence. But modern life trains us to disconnect outer events from inner states. We compartmentalize. We treat the material world as mechanical, isolated, random. We fix the problem and move on. Yet ants are not random creatures. They are among the most disciplined organisms on Earth. Structured colonies, hierarchies, storage systems, communication patterns, a society built on order, cooperation, and foresight. And when such a creature enters your private space, your home, it disrupts something. Maybe hygiene, maybe comfort, maybe certainty. But what if it also disrupts unconscious neglect? Ibn Arabi spoke of the human being as a microcosm, a universe within a universe. The outer world and inner world reflect one another, not in magical superstition, but in correspondence. If ants symbolize order, preparation, unity, provision, then what does their sudden presence invite you to examine? Is there disorder in your inner life? Is there neglected discipline? Is there something small, persistent, and ignored that is trying to organize itself? We are quick to destroy what irritates us, but slower to ask why it irritates us. There is something psychologically fascinating about how we react to minor disruptions. Ants are small, harmless individually, yet they provoke disproportionate urgency. Why? Because they expose vulnerability. If ants can enter, something was left open, a crack, a spill, a forgotten corner, and suddenly we become aware of unseen systems, paths they traveled, signals they followed, structures already in motion before we noticed. Existence often works that way. Things are in motion before you become conscious of them. Ibn Arabi would not tell you that ants are a prophecy. He would ask you whether you are awake enough to reflect. In American culture, especially today, life is fast. Burnout is normal. Anxiety is ambient. Homes are full, but minds are scattered. Discipline is admired, but rarely embodied. We are overwhelmed by information and undernourished in reflection. So when something small interrupts your routine, you eliminate it. But what if interruption is invitation? What if meaning does not shout, but arrives quietly? Consider this: ants never move alone. Even when you see one, there are others. Infrastructure exists beneath visibility, a hidden network. How many unseen networks operate in your own life? Habits, thought patterns, silent fears, unspoken ambitions, small movements that accumulate into large outcomes. Ants do not panic. They prepare, they gather for winter before winter arrives. They operate with foresight. And here we are, creatures with intellect and revelation, often living reactively. So when ants appear, perhaps the question is not metaphysical at all. Perhaps it is existential. What requires preparation in your life? What season is approaching that you have not prepared for? And more importantly, why did this question find you now? Because this is not just about insects, it is about perception. Ibn Arabi believed that reality has layers. What appears trivial may carry reflective depth, not because it is magical, but because the human being is capable of extracting meaning from the ordinary. The Qur'an speaks of those who reflect upon creation as people of understanding. Reflection is not superstition, it is awareness. If any of this resonates, if you have ever sensed that small events sometimes feel symbolically timed, comment one word: reflection. Not because ants are mystical, but because awareness is. And if this kind of thoughtful exploration speaks to you, subscribe. Not for sensationalism, not for fear-based narratives, but for grounded, intelligent, spiritual reflection that respects both faith and reason. Because what we are about to explore next goes deeper. If ants symbolize order, if existence carries layered meaning, then what does it say about the state of the modern soul when discipline enters the home uninvited? And what might that reveal about you? In the next block, we'll explore something unsettling. What if the ants are not invading, but mirroring? And what they represent might be exposing something inside you that you've been avoiding. Stay with me. Let's go deeper. If we strip away superstition and stay grounded, ants still represent something undeniably powerful: discipline, structure, patience, unity, and provision. Not as mystical symbols, but as observable realities. Ant colonies are among the most organized systems in the natural world. There is no chaos, no wasted motion, no ego-driven leadership struggles. Each ant operates within a role. Each movement serves the whole. Each action anticipates the future. And this is where the reflection becomes uncomfortable, because most modern human beings, especially in the West, live in the opposite state. Burnout without structure, ambition without discipline, information without integration, endless motion without direction. We wake up tired, scroll before we think, react before we reflect. We live surrounded by convenience, yet internally fragmented. So when ants appear, organized, silent, purposeful, it can feel almost ironic. A creature the size of a grain of rice modeling a level of order many adults struggle to sustain. This is not about romanticizing insects. It's about confronting contrast. Ibn Arabi described the human being as a microcosm, a small universe reflecting the greater cosmos. In this worldview, what we observe externally often echoes something internally, not because the external world bends to our psychology, but because perception itself is a bridge. When you notice ants entering your home, something subtle happens psychologically. You see order intruding into disorder, or perhaps disorder exposed by order. Think about it. Ants rarely invade spotless environments. They are drawn to remnants, forgotten crumbs, invisible residue, a small spill that seemed insignificant. In other words, neglected details. And that's where the symbolism sharpens. What details in your life have you neglected? Not dramatic sins, not catastrophic failures, small compromises, ignored disciplines, postponed responsibilities, unstructured habits. Modern life makes this easy. The American experience especially glorifies productivity but undermines rhythm. We celebrate hustle but ignore alignment. We pursue success but avoid internal audit. So we accumulate mental clutter. Ants, on the other hand, do not accumulate chaos. They operate through structure. Each ant knows its role. There is unity of direction. There is patience in repetition. There is preparation long before crisis. They store before winter. Now ask yourself honestly, are you living in preparation mode or reaction mode? Many of us only respond when something collapses. Financial crisis, health scare, relationship breakdown. But ants prepare before collapse. And perhaps that's why their sudden presence unsettles us. They are a mirror of foresight. What season might be approaching in your life that you are not preparing for? Career transition, spiritual accountability, a shift in responsibilities, a stage of life that requires maturity you have not yet cultivated. Ants do not argue about winter's arrival. They organize around it. There is a quiet humility in that. Now let's address something psychologically deeper. Why do small disturbances trigger disproportionate irritation? It's rarely about the ants. It's about control. We assume our home is contained, managed, secure. When ants appear, it reveals permeability. Something entered without permission, and that challenges our illusion of control. But here's a deeper layer. Ants do not enter randomly. They follow trails, chemical signals, pathways established gradually, which means by the time you see them, the system was already active. How often in life do outcomes appear suddenly, but we're actually developing quietly? Burnout doesn't happen overnight. Financial strain doesn't appear in a vacuum. Emotional distance doesn't materialize instantly. Small habits create large consequences. Ants embody that truth physically. Small actions, massive coordination, collective impact. In Islamic intellectual tradition, especially through thinkers like Ibn Arabi, there is an understanding that creation reflects divine attributes, not in a literal incarnation sense, but in qualities. Order reflects wisdom. Provision reflects generosity. Balance reflects justice. Ants gather provision not just for themselves, but for the colony. There is no selfish hoarding. There is no panic-driven accumulation. There is alignment. And here is where it intersects with modern anxiety. Many Americans today live in a constant scarcity mindset. Even those with financial stability feel existential insecurity. We overwork, overconsume, overschedule, as if survival depends on constant acceleration. But ants are patient. They move steadily, not frantically. There is a rhythm to them, which raises a subtle question. Is your life governed by rhythm or by panic? Because discipline is not intensity, it is consistency. Ants do not burn out. They operate within design. Humans burn out when they operate against design. Ibn Arabi's metaphysical framework suggests that each being has a station, a role aligned with its nature. When humans abandon alignment, fragmentation increases. Perhaps ants entering your home is not a supernatural sign. Perhaps it is a reflective moment, a small interruption asking, where is your structure? Where is your unity of intention? Where is your preparation? And even more deeply, where is your inner colony misaligned? Because human beings are not singular entities. You have competing desires, conflicting motivations, unresolved fears, fragmented attention. Ant colonies function because internal conflict is minimized. What would your life look like if your inner drives cooperated instead of competed? Imagine waking up with clarity instead of distraction, moving with direction instead of drifting, preparing intentionally instead of scrambling. Ants do not wait for motivation. They embody discipline, and discipline is deeply spiritual, not because it is rigid, but because it reflects trust. Trust that preparation matters. Trust that unseen seasons will arrive. Trust that effort today shapes tomorrow. And here is something critical. Symbolism is not superstition. It is interpretation. If ants enter your home and you choose to see only inconvenience, you eliminate them and move on. But if you pause and reflect, you might ask questions that change the trajectory of your life. What crumbs have I left unattended? What responsibilities have I delayed? What future am I unprepared for? And suddenly something small becomes transformative. Not because ants are mystical messengers, but because awareness is catalytic. Modern culture avoids discomfort. We eliminate irritation quickly, but growth often begins with irritation. The small disturbance that reveals deeper misalignment. Ants, in their disciplined silence, may represent something the modern soul desperately lacks. Order, patience, unity, preparation. And perhaps their presence is not about infestation, but invitation. Invitation to reorganize your interior life. Because in the next block, we need to address something even more essential. If ants represent order and preparation, then what does divine order look like? And where does trust, tawakkul, fit into all of this? Because discipline without trust becomes anxiety, and trust without discipline becomes laziness. The balance between them is where transformation lives. Let's explore that. Let's step carefully into deeper water. If ants represent order, preparation, discipline, then what does that say about the one who designed them? Not in a simplistic way, not in a cartoonish, everything is a sign way, but in a way that respects intelligence. In Islamic theology, Allah is described as Al-Hakim, the perfectly wise, not random, not impulsive, not arbitrary. And divine wisdom is not always loud. It is often embedded in patterns. Ant colonies operate with astonishing coordination. There is no visible commander shouting orders, no chaos, no ego wars, yet the system functions with breathtaking precision. This is not mystical exaggeration, it is observable biology. Now pause and ask yourself, if such microscopic creatures operate within precise order, what does that imply about existence itself? In classical Islamic thought, the universe is not chaotic. It is structured, layered, intentional. The Qur'an repeatedly emphasizes balance, mizan, proportion, measured design. The human problem is not lack of signs. It is inattentiveness. Modern Western culture often views life as accidental, random collision of forces, survival of the fittest. But even secular science acknowledges systemic intelligence in ecosystems. Ant colonies survive because they trust design. They do not rebel against winter. They do not panic when seasons shift. They adapt within order. This is where tawakkul enters. Tawakkul is often mistranslated as passive trust. It is not passivity, it is alignment. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, explained it with remarkable clarity when a man asked if he should tie his camel or trust Allah. He said, "Tie your camel and trust Allah." Effort and surrender are not opposites. They are partners. Ants tie their camel. They gather, they build, they prepare, but they do not obsess over outcomes. They operate within their role. Human beings often distort this balance. Some over-control, some under-act. Over-control creates anxiety. Under-action creates regret. Tawakkul is the middle path. You prepare as if effort matters, because it does. You trust as if control is limited, because it is. Now let's bring this into modern life. Many Americans live in a state of hyper-control, tracking productivity, tracking calories, tracking income, tracking performance. And yet internally, peace feels distant. Why? Because control without trust breeds fear. You can discipline yourself endlessly, but if you believe everything rests solely on your shoulders, exhaustion becomes inevitable. Ants prepare without existential anxiety. They operate inside design. And this is where divine order becomes psychologically transformative. If existence itself is structured with wisdom, then your life is not random either. Your delays, your setbacks, your waiting seasons, not random. This does not mean every inconvenience is a secret code. It means there is a larger architecture beyond immediate perception. And tawakkul means trusting that architecture without abandoning responsibility. Let's make this concrete. Maybe ants entered your home during a stressful financial period. You could interpret it as mere coincidence, and practically it is. But reflection asks a deeper question. Have you been preparing wisely or reacting frantically? Maybe ants appeared during a time of internal chaos. Are you living structurally, or emotionally, impulsively? Divine order is not superstition, it is coherence. And tawakkul is psychological grounding, because when you trust divine order, you stop catastrophizing, you stop comparing timelines, you stop resenting others' success. You focus on alignment. And here is something profound. Ants do not compete with bees. They do not compare their colony to another species. They operate within design. Much of modern anxiety is comparison-based. Social media has intensified this. You see others accelerating, and you question your worth. But tawakkul dissolves comparison. Because you understand that provision, risk, is allocated uniquely. In Islamic understanding, risk is not only money. It includes opportunity, timing, relationships, health, insight. And ants embody risk in action. They gather what is allocated. They do not hoard irrationally. They do not despair when one crumb is small. They trust continuation. Human beings, on the other hand, often panic over momentary scarcity, and scarcity mentality can sabotage abundance. Now listen carefully. Divine order does not eliminate hardship. Ant colonies face destruction, floods, predators, collapse, but they rebuild. Why? Because structure exists internally. That is tawakkul in motion. You prepare, you rebuild, you trust continuity. If ants entering your home disturb you, perhaps it is because they expose disordered areas. But divine order is not about perfection. It is about course correction. You clean, you reorganize, you seal openings. Similarly, in life, you address habits, you restructure routines, you remove toxic influences, and then you trust. Because here is the deeper truth. Control is limited. Preparation is powerful. Trust is stabilizing. Tawakkul does not mean sitting back and waiting for miracles. It means engaging fully without internal panic. Ants embody effort without existential fear. They are not overwhelmed by winter's inevitability. They prepare for it, and then they endure it. Modern humans often live in imagined winters, anticipatory anxiety. What if this fails? What if I lose everything? What if I am behind? Tawakkul reframes that. What is my responsibility? What is beyond my control? What must I prepare for, and what must I release? Divine order does not guarantee comfort. It guarantees meaning, and meaning stabilizes the psyche. Ibn Arabi wrote extensively about unity, wahdat al-wujud, not in a simplistic pantheistic sense, but as an interconnectedness of existence under divine will. Nothing stands isolated. Your internal state influences your perception of external events. If you are chaotic internally, ants feel invasive. If you are reflective, ants feel instructive. Same event, different lens. And that lens is shaped by your understanding of order. Let me ask you something quietly. What area of your life feels unstructured right now? Finances, health, spiritual discipline, relationships? Have you been preparing or postponing? Divine order does not shame you. It invites alignment. And tawakkul prevents despair during adjustment. Because trust means, even if I have been disorganized, I can realign. Even if I have delayed preparation, I can start now. Ants do not waste time regretting yesterday's crumb. They gather today's. This is divine rhythm. Effort, trust, continuation. In the next block, we will make this personal, not theoretical. We will ask uncomfortable questions. What must you prepare for? What must you stop avoiding? What winter might be approaching that you sense but haven't acknowledged? Because awareness without action is incomplete, and reflection without transformation is wasted. Let's move there. Let's bring this home, not philosophically, not abstractly, personally. If ants entering a space can symbolize order, preparation, patience, provision, then the question is no longer about insects. The question is about you. What in your life is disorganized right now? Be honest. Is it your schedule, your finances, your spiritual discipline, your emotional boundaries, your health? Ants prepare for winter long before winter arrives. They do not wait for snow to begin gathering. They sense seasonal shifts before they are obvious. Now pause. Is there a winter in your life you have been ignoring? Not a disaster, not fear-based thinking, just reality. A career shift you know is coming. A financial adjustment you keep postponing, a relationship that needs clarity, a habit that quietly erodes your stability. Preparation is not paranoia, it is maturity. Ants do not gather obsessively, they gather consistently. Small crumbs, repeated effort, no drama. Modern life glorifies dramatic transformation. But divine order works through consistency. You don't become spiritually stable overnight. You don't build financial resilience in a weekend. You don't cultivate discipline through motivation alone. It is incremental. And here is something profound. Ants never gather for ego. They gather for collective survival. What are you gathering for? Is your preparation aligned with purpose or comparison? Are you building stability or chasing validation? This is where personal transformation begins, not with grand declarations, with uncomfortable clarity. Let me ask you directly, what have you been avoiding? A difficult conversation, a necessary apology, a budgeting plan, a health routine, a return to prayer? Avoidance feels easier short term, but winter does not cancel itself because you ignore it. Ants do not negotiate with seasons. They align with them, and alignment often requires letting go. Is there clutter in your life? Physical clutter can mirror mental clutter. Emotional clutter can mirror spiritual stagnation. Perhaps ants entering your space are not a mystical omen, but a subtle mirror. Where are the cracks? Where is the excess? Where is the neglected corner? Transformation does not begin with fear. It begins with ownership. And ownership requires humility. Tawakkul does not mean Allah will fix everything for me. It means I will do my part sincerely and trust what follows. If ants symbolize provision, consider this. They never gather what they cannot carry. Provision is proportional. Are you asking for outcomes you are not preparing to sustain? Sometimes we want success without structure, influence without integrity, wealth without discipline. Ants would collapse under that model. Divine balance ensures sustainability. Let's go deeper. What habits would strengthen your internal structure? Waking earlier, structured prayer, reduced digital consumption, weekly financial review, physical movement, consistent learning. Transformation rarely requires reinvention. It requires reinforcement. And here is where psychological awakening intensifies. Ants work collectively. Human beings often isolate. Modern independence culture says, handle everything yourself. But even spiritually, we are communal beings. Who are you aligned with? Do the people around you reflect discipline or distraction? Unity does not mean uniformity. It means shared direction. Ant colonies thrive because each ant understands its role. Do you understand yours? Or are you drifting between identities? Another hard question. Are you living reactively or intentionally? Ants do not wait for chaos to respond. They anticipate. Preparation is empowerment, and empowerment reduces anxiety. Much of modern stress comes from unpreparedness. Financial stress from lack of planning, health stress from neglect, spiritual stress from disconnection. Transformation requires confronting that, not harshly, honestly. And remember, this is not superstition, it is reflection. The external world often reveals internal imbalance. If ants disturb you, ask, is my life structured, or am I improvising through seasons that require preparation? Winter always comes. So does spring. But only those who prepared can enjoy spring without panic. This is not about fear, it is about readiness. Divine wisdom does not waste signs, and personal transformation is not dramatic. It is disciplined. One small action today, one intentional adjustment tomorrow, one honest conversation, one consistent routine, one surrendered prayer, and slowly, internal order returns. Now here is something empowering. You are not late. Ants gather daily. They do not compare their progress to last year. They continue. So begin. Whatever feels disordered, begin there. Repair, restructure, recommit. Not because ants entered your home, but because awareness has entered your mind. And awareness without action becomes regret. In the final block, we will close calmly, not with fear, not with promises, with perspective. Because when perception changes, everything changes. Let's finish well.